Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Holosun EPS. So last week we took a look at a 2,000 round review of the Holosun EPS carry. This is that optic's big brother. This is the EPS, just EPS, that's just what they're calling it. It shares some similarities with the EPS carry, namely the footprint. It uses the same 507K footprint, which I thought a little strange for what I consider to be a full-size duty optic. They're not calling it the carry, they're not really marketing specifically for concealed carry, so game on for the duty testing that I normally do on duty marketed red dots or optics that they allude to their duty use. So their marketing materials, basically if you put out marketing material that includes cops and military guys using your optic, I'm going to put it through the duty testing whether you say it's for duty use or not. Cool thing about it, first questions I've been getting from people is what's the difference between this and the 509? Well, obviously the footprint is different. The footprint allows us to use traditional height sights, which people have been complaining about for various reasons pretty much since red dots on handguns became a thing. People have had to use suppressor height sights. If you're one of those guys that uses a Delta Point Pro, you basically have to use like, well, really high, ridiculously high suppressor sights, which changes your point of aim, point of impact with your sights, which can be aggravating. My feeling has always been, I don't need those sights unless there's something wrong with the optic. So it doesn't matter to me. Not everybody feels that way. So I'm just using some regular old Ameriglows on here. Traditional height. I can co-witness, I can use the sights through the optic window, even though it's not something I'm really going to worry about, but that is probably the biggest glaring point. Another thing people brought up before we get into specifics is why they went with that footprint. I mentioned this a little bit in the the EPS carry video. This footprint allows the screws to sit as far back as possible in the shoe. I looked at a bunch of different footprints that are out there, and this one, the screw wells sit really far back, which allows you to create a closed optic and still have a little bit of that rear ledge to be able to mount the optic. You got your recoil bosses in there. No other footprint does that. Somebody brought up the RMR footprint. The screw wells sit too far forward to create a realistically, I mean, they could probably do it, but it'd be stupid expensive and it'd be a very, very tight tunnel. You just can't do it. There have been other attempts at the process. You look at what SIG did with the Romeo 2. It starts out as an open optic, you mount it, and then you create an enclosed optic with the accessories that come with it. But people complain about that being not nitrogen purged or argon filled or whatever you're putting in there to help prevent fogging. So I get it. Everybody's going to take a different approach to the problem. Holosun's approach was to use a footprint to put the screw wells far back that you could get an enclosed optic and allow it to sit low enough to co-witness with traditional height sights. This optic, like a lot of their optics, comes with multiple reticle color options, red, green. They might do a gold. It's powered by a 1620 battery, not a 1632 or a 2025. Battery life is quoted right around there about 50,000 hours, which is pretty awesome. Adjustments, you've got 8 daylight and 4 night vision settings for those people who want to shoot with night vision. Me personally, I use the same brightness setting for all conditions. Something I got into with night vision when I think about using it for professional purposes was, what if I had to go from night vision to white light? I don't want to have to be messing with a reticle and brighten it up in order to see it when I transition from night vision world to what we used to call going from green to white. When I transition to white light, my reticle wouldn't be there because it'd be in a night vision mode. Don't want that. So I want to be able to make that transition smoothly. So night vision modes, obviously I checked them out during the review process. They work fine. Light transmission is excellent looking through the optic. We'll get into that a little bit more later. But the settings are there. Settings are there for you to use. And depending on which model you get, you can get a solar powered option or a non-solar powered option. Also, you can get a single dot or you have multiple reticle options. So basically, you can kind of pick exactly what optic you need in this body, in this footprint, to fit your specific needs when it comes to reticle, power sources, etc. Unlike the EPS carry, there is not a built-in rear sight, even though they share the same footprint. So theoretically, you could put this optic on a much smaller gun. I just don't really see why you would. But hey, people do things, and people are going to keep to do things. There's plenty of optics that I wouldn't recommend for duty carry that people use on duty guns. So, I mean, I'm not the definitive decider. I'm not the definitive authority on red dot use. I'm just a guy who has a pretty educated opinion and a very large sample size of failure because of how many students I see with red dot handguns. Body, just like the EPS carry, 7075 aluminum. Features are very similar, very identical, depending on which model you get. For me, it's multiple power sources. The model I have has the solar power option, which I immediately just turned off, and I'm just running the 2 MOA dot for the testing process. Because this is a duty focused optic, I put it through the duty schedule, which of course, as you know, is 2,000 rounds for video purposes. But also there's included a shoulder height drop test every 500 rounds, which is what most people show up to watch, and just an overall evaluation of the performance and the quality of the optic. Because it is a duty focused optic, I do use it under night vision. I do use it a lot under low light intentionally to get an idea of glass clarity in very lighting conditions. And of course, using it just for my normal traditional practice, and every chance I have an opportunity to, I bring the gun to classes, teach with it, get a more realistic feel for it, as well as I can, you know, shooting paper and steel. No matter how realistic you make that stuff, it's not very realistic, but it's an evaluation. And I do film the first 2,000 rounds of it, and the evaluation continues far beyond that. I take all of the duty testing evaluation I do till the optics break. And if you want that information, you can check it out on the SageDynamics.org website. Scroll down, there's a PDF you can download, MRDS for duty purposes, duty use. In that white paper, there is a periodic update. I update the paper at least twice a year that includes round counts on optics that I currently have in testing. I don't always do videos on them because it takes a lot longer to do a video than it does just to shoot the gun and collect the data, because I got to set up cameras and stuff like that. So because my main job is teaching and data collection, which is a hobby, and YouTube has always been just a hobby, not everything's going to get a video, but who knows, you may get a 10,000 round update, we'll see. Getting right into it, I like this optic a lot. It sits low in the gun. That's not something I have ever really felt like I needed, if I'm being honest with you. A lot of people talk about, oh, I want to set the optic to sit lower, I want the optic to sit lower, I want the optic to sit lower. And I mean, I guess I kind of understand it, but I can also just do this, you know? So if an optic is in front of my face and I feel like it doesn't sit low enough, I can kind of move the gun and put it where I want to put it in front of my face, unlike a rifle where you're kind of married to a cheek weld and an optic mount height. So I guess I see where people are coming from. I guess it depends on shooting style, what your pedigree is, how you were taught to run a handgun. A lot of other factors that go into that. But me personally, never really cared about the height so much as I care about being able to use the sights through the optic if I have to. Do they have to be suppressor height sight? Again, I don't mind suppressor height. I don't. People ask me a lot of questions about which sights I choose. I choose the cheapest ones that are going to work, because iron sight technology is pretty much unchanged for about 500 years. Yeah, we made them glow in the dark, or we made them shine really bright during the day with fiber optics, but that's pretty much the end of technology assessments on iron sights for handguns. Rifles, the argument can be made that we've done a lot of cool stuff, but with pistol sights, it's pretty much just been better materials, different sight radiuses, but they're pretty much the same as they've always been. Not a lot of advancement has taken place there, and you can make very easy arguments about fiber optics or tritium sights, especially tritium sights, being more of a talisman than a useful feature, whereas fiber optics can do really cool things during the day, I guess. But we're not talking about getting into the argument about night sights and fiber optic sights and all. So I just usually go with some all blacks. As long as I can fit, I can see through them, I can get my sight picture, check the point of aim, check the point of impact, I'm gonna be a happy guy. Acquisition of this optic when running it from concealed carry, from duty carry, the optic itself, the window is very generous. You get a really good size on it, really good presentation. Window size is functionally identical to me as size-wise, even though there are some slight measurement variances just from presentation and acquisition and sight picture to what I'm gonna get from a 509T. The glass quality does seem to be a little bit different. And one thing that I was initially concerned with the overall design is how this rear window doesn't really have a shroud to help stick out, like an overhang or an eave to protect it, whereas the front does. And this was a problem identified on the 509T when I tested it, or still testing it. I got a 509T right now that's just about to break 15,000 rounds, still getting dropped, still running great. But it's one of the first generation ones that they don't even make anymore. That bothered me a little bit. I don't know, kind of the cheater here is you're looking at it right now and it's unbroken. So obviously that went well, and you're looking at the front lens and that went well. So you kind of have an idea already in the video, because I filmed the commentary after the 2,000 round process. You have an idea that it passed, but we'll get to that. The clarity is really good. Light transmission through night vision, I did shoot it a little bit. Probably about 100 rounds under knots. And shooting a handgun under night vision is a smaller category, let's be honest. But there are people that do need to do it, or do want to do it, because sometimes it's all about one. You want to just shoot some steel with some night vision on, because it's super fun. I like to do it. Maybe you want to do that too. Light transmission is good. Is it the best? I think that's kind of subjective, because tube quality varies. Are you running white phos, green phos, thin filmless, what generation? Are you running an illuminator? Are you not running an illuminator? I basically bring the gun up in front of my face and I get to see the dot, and I just kind of see the dot float and I just shoot the gun. So when people ask me a lot about light transmission, I'm like, well, I can see the dot and I can see the target, so yeah, light transmission checks out. I will say this, some optics are worse than others with how clear the dot appears, how much you kind of almost like it tints it. This one's pretty good. I will say this, it's not the best light transmission I've ever seen, but it is well within the realm of positive identification, use, acquisition, and shooting. The night vision settings are excellent, but like I said, again, I run mine on a traditional brightness setting, so I'm running with a bigger dot anyway because night vision magnifies the light. Got through that first 500 rounds, and of course, after 500 rounds, you know what happens? We get to the burn down. Burn down is 500 rounds as quickly as possible to see if I can identify any issues in a short period of time that you wouldn't notice over the same 500 rounds over the same or over a much longer time period. So 500 rounds in about 45 minutes versus 45 days, 45 weeks, so on and so forth. Here's your burn down. First to last round, burn down went excellent, no issues with the optic itself. I didn't really expect any. Burn downs on handguns are almost pointless, especially for optic purposes, but I wanted to see, you know, mainly I'm checking out the mounting system. Is the mounting for the optic itself gonna give way, gonna become loose? Any problems gonna be had there? No issues with the 500 rounds, which is kind of what I expected, but it is something I've been keeping an eye on throughout the review process. Holosun has never traditionally done a great job of including screws that are going to work well with everything, but they do include more than one type of screw, which I find very helpful because not every optic company does that. A lot of guys, they just throw a set of screws in there and be like, you need to mill your gun to our screws, versus Holosun being like, here's some, and hopefully one set of these screws is going to work for whatever your footprint is. So I gotta hand it to them there. They are doing more than what other people are doing when it comes to mounting their optics to a wide plethora of 1632, 440, or whatever, 632, or 440 or whatever screw pitch is out there that people are picking. You got screw head differences and all this other nonsense. So I do appreciate them for that. We're pretty rigid here. It's got recoil bosses, it's got screws mounted, so I wasn't worried about it, but I wanted to see if the burn down was going to shake anything loose. And then of course we get into the drop testing. The next 1,000 rounds was just using the optic, like I said, for my general everyday practice, everyday purpose, whatever I happen to be doing or happen to be working on. I ran it on my agency arms, one of my agency arms Sage editions, 9mm, which is what primarily I shoot, and it's either comped or ported, or I generally don't like to shoot it because recoil's stupid. And recoil management is not like some kind of machismo gateway thing. I think everybody should be like, yeah, I'd like to have no recoil, please, thank you. Optic performed kind of as I would have expected it to. The dot clarity is excellent for my eyes. Again, it's going to vary, it's going to be subjective. Glass clarity during the day in varied lighting conditions, I wasn't getting any shadows, I wasn't getting any ghost reticles when the light was hitting the optic window just right. Something usually you see more with open emitters versus closed emitters, but it's something to look for in all optics and something I'm going to check out. Under low light conditions, same deal. I wasn't getting any reflection windows or anything like that sometimes bright weapon lights can cause at certain targets at certain distances. Obviously a lot of one-handed manipulations didn't create any issues there. Just putting it through the normal testing, it was kind of boringly reliable. Of course, the drop testing. Every 500 rounds, I'm going to drop this optic. So before we get into that, let me show you the 5-round group I fired, 25 yards zero distance, after basically a confirmation group before I began the process in the drop testing. And then you have your drop tests. And now a final group fired at the same distance, 25 yards, 124 grain gold dot, same two factors. This, of course, is a bench supported. I don't shoot these standing. I shoot okay. I don't shoot that okay. Not consistently enough to make it worth it for video anyway. So I do bag these guns down pretty well, shooting it off a table. Because handguns are notoriously hard to zero with red dots, so you come up with a system. But anyway, here's your 5-round group I fired after that final drop test. Gun maintains 0, kind of what I expected, kind of what I hoped for, and kind of what I got. The caveat, of course, sample size of 1. My experience has been excellent thus far. You've seen me shoot it on video. You've seen me drop it on video. Everything is functioning as I would hope it would function. I've shown you, best that I can with the purpose of video, what the sight picture is going to look like, what the glass clarity looks like, how things are going to work. But the caveat to that is always it's a video, which is not the human eye. So your experiences may vary. Hopefully, when you buy one of these, it works just as well as mine did, and I expect it will. What do I think about the optic? I'm glad it exists. Do I need it? No, I got 509s. I can take off my Agency Arms AOS plate here, put my 509 right back on this gun. But I like the fact that I get to run regular height sights. And I think a lot of people are going to like that fact as well. I can see this becoming a preferred optic for certain avenues because of that simple fact. If you've already got a Glock MOS, you're probably going to need a plate, but even with the plate, you could potentially still get your sight picture. It's not something I checked, so don't quote me on that, because I try to avoid using Glock MOSs whenever possible, because I don't like the Glock MOS footprint. And even though there are quality adapter plates out there for it, I'd much rather just use something like an Agency Arms AOS or some of the other cool footprints that are out there. Love me some Glocks, don't care for the MOS system. This optic is definitely going to fill a need, and it's going to exist parallel to the 509T as far as I'm concerned. If you have a 509T, do you need to replace it? No, 509T is fine. Do you want to check one of these out and see if maybe it could fulfill a different purpose or maybe get done what you want done better? I would check that out. Seriously, consider it, because it might be something in your avenue that's going to work well for you. But as far as a duty-use optic, at least initially, this first 2,000 rounds, big pass for the Holosun EPS. I'm Eric Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.